My name is Emily Harmeyer, and I will be speaking today about genetically modified organisms, who owns their patents, what laws regulate and protect these patents, and the effects of these patents on the agriculture industry and us as consumers. I will then relate this topic to the ethical theory of utilitarianism, which seeks to maximize happiness for the most parties affected. We all know that genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, have a bad reputation. Concerns about GMOs are widespread and numerous, owing largely to their predominance in modern agriculture and the comparative lack of information about their safety. Whether this reputation is necessary or deserved is a question that must be answered, and to answer this question, we must first ask, who owns the patents on these GMOs? What laws are in place to regulate these patents? And how do these patents and regulations affect the consumers and the agriculture industry as a whole? Genetically modified crops have been in use in the United States since their introduction to the market in 1996. Used primarily to promote resistance to herbicides and pests, the prevalence of GM crops has grown very rapidly since then. As the United States Department of Agriculture notes, by as early as 2005, a mere 9 years after their introduction to the market, approximately 87% of U.S. soybean acres, 52% of U.S. corn acres, and 79% of U.S. cotton acres were planted using seeds incorporating biotechnology. Since then, the use of biotechnology has continued to increase, representing 93% of soybeans, 88% of corn, and a whopping 94% of cotton in 2012. The USDA now states that it has issued a total of 157 patents for biotechnology products and methods to date. But who owns these patents? The Action Group on Erosion, Technology, and Concentration, or the ETC Group, provides a list of the world's top 10 seed companies in 2008. These 10 companies accounted for approximately 67% of the market share in the proprietary seed market. This means that these 10 companies owned over 2/3 of all the seeds subject to intellectual property laws, a cool $14.5 billion of this $22 billion market. Moreover, the proprietary seed market accounts for 82% of the commercial seed market as a whole. Topping the list are the U.S. corporations Monsanto and DuPont, and Syngenta of Switzerland. These three gene giants, as the ETC Group calls them, dominate this market, each clearing $2 to $5 billion a year in seed sales. Monsanto alone comprises 23% of the proprietary seed market, and with its cohorts, DuPont and Syngenta, comprises 47% of this market, or over $10 billion. With their near monopolies on the seed market, these corporations are free to raise prices unabated by competition. For these massive corporations, genetically engineered seeds now drive their success, with 48% of DuPont's seed revenue resulting from biotech seeds in 2007. Also in 2007, the global value of genetically modified crops was estimated to be nearly $7 billion. Since then, the trend has only increased. With the United States government looking the other way on several major collaborations between these and other biotechnology giants, without imposing new or enforcing current antitrust legislation against such non-merger mergers, which seem to exploit a loophole in these regulations. Among these collaborations were Monsanto and BASF's $1.5 billion research and development collaboration, and collaborations between Monsanto and Dow Agrochemicals, Monsanto and Syngenta and DuPont. These four colossal collaborations occurred in the space of only a little over a year, in each case consolidating these companies' already vast power into what the ETC Group refers to as a tech cartel. These companies' enormous success has benefited not only from the acquiescence of the U.S. government, but also with the assistance of government subsidies. While the ETC group presents its argument that these sort of monopolistic arrangements hurt consumers and the rest of the agriculture industry, Demont and his fellow researchers offer an alternative view. Their counterargument uses a meta-analysis to support the supposition that, on average, farmers and consumers share two-thirds of the global benefits of the worldwide adoption of GM crops. On the other hand, only one-third of the benefits accumulate upstream with the gene developers and seed suppliers, such as the corporations vilified by the ETC group. In short, these so-called monopolies have not done as much economic damage as some would have us believe, nor do they wield as much influence. The researchers do note, however, a correlation between the strength of intellectual property rights protections and the ratio of benefits received downstream by farmers to the benefits experienced by the seed corporation. In other words, in situations where intellectual property rights protections are weaker, the farmers benefit more. When property rights protections are strong, as is the case with Monsanto's biotech cotton, the benefits to the farmers decrease as compared to the corporations. In the U.S., where patent laws and intellectual property rights protections have spurred the intensification of the use of GMO crops, corporations such as Monsanto exercise their property rights by instating no replant policies, which state that farmers may not replant the seeds produced by their GM crops. They must instead purchase the next generation of seeds from the seed corporation the following year. Such policies allow seed suppliers to profit from their intellectual property each year, at the expense of the farmers who would ordinarily cut their costs by replanting any viable seeds from their previous crop. While this policy seems unfair to its many critics, the U.S. Supreme Court has upheld it as part of the corporation's intellectual property rights in multiple federal cases, including Monsanto v. McFarling and once again in Monsanto v. Scruggs. Additionally, a Canadian court ruled in favor of Monsanto in the case of Monsanto v. Schmeisser, in which the farmer did not intend to plant GM seeds, but instead planted non-GM seeds that had been unintentionally contaminated by a neighbor's GM seeds. Cases such as this have spurred some scholars to suggest the addition of an intent element to patent legislation, but to no avail as of yet. If courts continue to hold up such decisions, the argument made by Demont and his colleagues may soon cease to be relevant, as the benefit of GMO crop production begins to accumulate upstream in greater proportions as a result of stricter intellectual property protections. While GMOs inspire concern among individual citizens, they have yet to inspire international agreement upon standards of assessment and regulation of such products. In 1990, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, first attempted to develop such a standard, the Substantial Equivalence Standard. This standard stipulated that GM foods were to be tested against their non-GM counterparts on the criteria of nutrition, toxicology, immunology, and pathogenicity. If the GM product was found to be equivalent or no worse than its conventional counterpart, it was considered safe. While the U.S. still operates under this standard, the European Union has adopted the precautionary principle, which takes the substantial equivalence principle a step further, placing the burden of proof that a food product is safe on the producer of the product and withholding the use and marketing of said product until its safety can be proven. While crops have gone relatively unregulated in the United States as compared to the European Union, a few relevant regulations are in place. Established in 1986, the Coordinated Framework for the Regulation of Biotechnology defines the U.S. government's policies on GM regulations, which grants primary control of GM plants to the USDA, but also grants additional supervision to the Environmental Protection Agency and the Food and Drug Administration. While the USDA has since instated the Plant Protection Act of 2000 and the Biotechnology Regulatory Service established in 2002 under the auspices of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, these regulations apply only to plant pests and noxious weeds, the list of which is arbitrary and may be altered by a simple petition to the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. To date, no laws governing any of these three organizations directly address GMOs. This oversight, paired with the complexity inherent to this framework, make the regulation of GMOs in the United States chaotic, with many loopholes to be exploited. Since the establishment of these regulations, the U.S. has taken steps towards deregulation, when in 2011, the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service declined to regulate a popular genetically modified lawn grass because it did not incorporate any genetic material from recognized plant pests, as all previous GM crops did, setting it outside of the regulatory scope of the organization. This decision allowed the grass to be sold without the pre-testing, approval, or monitoring of other GM crops, while also setting a precedent for other GM crops that would later exploit the same loophole. Other loopholes inherent to the current framework include the absence of limitations on the volume or acreage of a new GM plant allowed to be planted during even the earliest phases of its approval process. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service requires little information about planting sites for these unapproved GMOs prior to their initial planting, and they conduct few or no experimental plantings. Before approving the plant, they consider only whether the new GM plant itself can be considered a plant pest, neglecting to consider the effects and likelihood of genetic drift or of the plants interbreeding with non-GM plants, which may result in the development of herbicide-tolerant weeds. As I have demonstrated in my presentation, the world's top 10 seed corporations own the vast majority of GMO patents, making these corporations and their employees and shareholders a party whose interests must be taken into consideration in a utilitarian ethical scheme. While these patents increase the happiness of the shareholders of the seed corporations, they decrease the happiness of the farmers. In general, the stronger the intellectual property rights protections, the more a corporation can monopolize the industry and exploit other participants in the industry. However, when intellectual property rights protections are not so stringent, the farmers and consumers can benefit from GMO production along with the seed producers. This means that intellectual property rights need not be abandoned for the sake of the farmers. They need only be revised in such a way that farmers and seed producers may profit equitably. Regulations of GMOs are chaotic, with no internationally accepted standards and with the US still clinging to a standard that the EU considers to be outdated. The US regulations also suffer from a framework that contains many loopholes for GM seed producers to exploit for their own gain. This information suggests that, as the system is arranged currently, the maximal benefit goes to the seed producers once again, but this time at the price of the consumers and the environment, both of which represent the largest parties affected and both of which may suffer yet unknown effects. To rectify this, we must establish international standards that place the burden of proof of a GMO's innocuousness on the product's producers, thereby ensuring the health and safety of all GMOs released onto the market, in turn creating maximal happiness for all. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation and thank you for your attention.